Okay, well, everyone, while we're waiting for folks to join and to get started, I'm going to go ahead and have a couple of announcements. My name's Pete Eberle. I'm with the Colorado Renewable Energy Society, or CRES. CRES and our local chapters provide education, advocacy, and community engagement that help accelerate Colorado towards a carbon neutral future powered by 100% renewable energy. Founded in 1996, CRES is a statewide nonpartisan 501c3 that is supported by our sustaining individual members, business members, as well as donations. You can sign up for our newsletter, event announcements, and social media, and become a member or donor by going to cres-energy.org, cres-energy.org. Also, make sure to check out our YouTube channel where this video will eventually be published. We're actually getting close to 300 videos now. Our video volunteer has been busy getting our backlog cleared out, and we've garnered over 1.4 million views. So there's a lot of great information out there. And then before I get to announcements, some special thanks to our business sponsors, which include Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, Centon Instruments, PRPA, that's Platte River Power Authority, Solaris Energy, Sandbox Solar, Greystone Technologies, BrightSense, the Colorado Green Building Guild, and the Colorado Solar and Storage Association. And in terms of our upcoming events, here in August, we have a couple, and we've got a lot of stuff planned for the fall. But on Wednesday, August 13th, at 6 p.m. in Louisville, Colorado, we will be doing a tour of the Vaisala headquarters in the U.S. And the event is titled Vaisala, Weather Solutions for Renewable Energy Industry and Beyond. While many people obviously know that the weather is very important for renewable energy, the wind and sun, Vaisala is a leader in terms of forecasting, metrology, and instrumentation that play a critical role in renewable energy siting, optimizing operations, and forecasting for reliable grid management. That event will kick off at 6 p.m. We'll have this up on the website here within the next few days. And we're going to have a little bit of networking, then a little presentation and tour of their instrument garden, and then back to some networking. And then on Thursday, August 28th, in Golden, Colorado, at the Jefferson Unitarian Church, we will have How to Solve Colorado's Outage Problem. That will feature Jim Gilbert of the CRES Policy Committee, who will look at what truly lies at the root of some of the challenges that are happening, particularly in the IOU land, with outages and ways we can solve it together through a bottom-up meets top-down approach to empowering communities and encouraging distributed energy prosumerism. So without further ado, Zeyneb, I will go ahead and hand it off to you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. So I have a deck to share, and I realize there's a lot of different folks here, and I want to make sure don't get the level right. I heard that you all know a lot. So I was just saying that, I realize there's a lot of people here, and I want to make sure I've heard that you all know a ton about thermal energy networks, and I still am going to just start with a quick basics and framing to make sure we're all on the same page. So please be patient with me if I'm telling you stuff you already know. I always have this as my cover slide with the image and the background of our gas system, because I actually think it's a little bit inspiring when we think about how big an energy transformation or the extent of infrastructure needed. It's good to realize that what we have today, and that image is of a existing gas network, some pipes of which were put in the time of President Lincoln. It started with one pipe going in the ground, and whoever put that first couple of pipes in, they probably did not imagine the extent and the duration which it lasted. And so as we stand today, imagining what the energy system of the future looks like, I think it's always a great place to start to realize that, We have new needs to meet. We have new technology at our disposal, but we are also in some ways in the same place that they were. To tap the thermal energy opportunity with geothermal energy networks or thermal energy networks, if we have, I first want to talk about what the thermal energy opportunity is and why thermal. And so, first of all, we haven't really been counting thermal very much. So this is a step back, crazy Sankey diagram of our entire energy system in the United States. And it's all the energy in on the left, and it's all the energy use out on the right. And that dark gray box is all the energy we actually use. And the light gray box is basically all of our wasted energy. Because our energy systems aren't that efficient, and we waste a lot of energy in transmission, in light, in heat, and that wasted heat energy, that's waste thermal, and it's an enormous part of our wasted energy. So there's that. And then there's another thing, which is that all of our humanity using energy in the entire world, let's go global now, uses about half a zettajoule. I think it's a cool unit, never knew it before. But here's the crazy part. Yeah, there we go. The Earth today is absorbing more than 10 times that every year from excess heat from the sun. So climate change is a thermal energy challenge. At its core, it is the warming, though we don't call it global warming anymore, it is the warming of the Earth. And the ocean, the bedrock, and at the tiniest scale, the Earth, are absorbing extra thermal energy because of the greenhouse gases around us. So that combination of the thermal energy that exists in our Earth, the thermal energy we waste, and the thermal energy that is extra because of climate change, all of that together is a massive thermal energy opportunity. And it's just beginning to be recognized. So the International Energy Association, IEA, published its first ever report on geothermal this past fall. And in it was this like sleeper line, it wasn't the biggest focus, but it just says the technical potential of geothermal will be more than enough to meet all heat demand. And then it just lists continents. So there's this scale of opportunity that is just beginning to dawn on humanity, on people, on governments. We haven't been making little bar charts of here's all the thermal. We've been ignoring it. But that tapping of this thermal opportunity is possible thanks to geothermal heat pumps and to thermal energy networks. And it is a way for us to not just meet our thermal needs as a species, but also to help restore our Earth and rebalance or achieve thermal equilibrium. So I'm just going to spend one moment, because Colorado is blessed with many forms of geothermal, just to make sure everyone here knows that today I am talking only about the geothermal technology pictured on the right. I call all of these together the whole geothermal family. Geothermal like the last name. Geothermal power is awesome. You guys have some of it. I'm in Massachusetts, we have none of it. We don't even have the direct use like the hot spring, but what we do have is the one on the right, where we've taken a geothermal heat pump and turned it into a kind of utility scale technology. I do call both the heat pump or the geo building or geo heating and cooling and the geo network, I call them both ambient or surface geothermal technologies that everywhere and anywhere are geothermal. They're the geothermal that it can work everywhere and for anyone, and all of them, of course, are stable and rock solid. All right, so having understood that we're all on the same page with the thermal opportunity and geothermal, I just want to comment a little bit on the organization I lead, HEET, which started out actually as a bunch of neighbors doing barn raisings for our local buildings to weatherize them, and grew over time, based in a location with a lot of nerdy people. We just kept learning and iterating and growing. And so our approach is to try to solve the big complex problems by engaging everybody, and finding where the key levers, the biggest problems are sometimes the biggest solution opportunities, and then innovating and iterating together until we have alignment where all of the core stakeholder needs are met, which then allows for this kind of spectacular forward momentum in a way that doesn't happen when you don't have that alignment. So through that process, I'm having a little trouble clicking here. Let's see. There we go. We attempted to figure out how to deal with the very challenging problem of rising affordability for heating and cooling in our region, combined with an aging gas system that required investment. We're kind of at the end of life cycle, like bunch of aging pipe. If we put money into it and we have climate emissions goals and we have affordability challenges, how do we make that work? And it was like we had trains running in opposite directions on the same track. And so trying to solve that problem, and it's clicked back to me. Yeah, there we go. Trying to solve that problem, we brought together every core stakeholder group and worked to define the core system needs that everyone needed to move forward. And that included the workers on the gas system and the academics and the people, customers in a household, and pretty much every group we could, we brought together, and we built trust and talked. And the list on the right were the core system needs for this challenge. And, we got quite a few laughs on those core system needs, like, yeah, that's great. And how are you going to solve that one? So this is how we solved it. And it's really, really just an incremental innovation on things that already existed. It's taking the geothermal heat pump, which is the most efficient heat pump, taking a distribution loop that, district energy has been around forever, but this is the most simple version, this ambient temperature loop. And you have one of the first operating installations in the world in Colorado. I'm going to get more into why that is the most efficient distribution loop. And then adding to it, not just geothermal boreholes, which are one of the most efficient forms of energy, but also every other form of waste or available thermal energy around you. And so adding up each of these components, each of them is old tech, together in this new formation, it is new tech. And really unlocks a new financing model that allows this geothermal heat pump and the thermal opportunity all around us to help us solve the problem. So this is for those of you who are way in the weeds on thermal energy networks and are wondering what the heck is the difference between a district energy labeling and thermal energy network, and what is a geothermal energy network. I promise you really don't need to dig into this, but I think one of the core things to understand is the reason we started using the word network is because we moved from a two pipe to a single pipe and allowed a very kind of straightforward ease of use utility growth model where you could add and subtract and interconnect these loops, allowing for a kind of scaling that wasn't typically done in other approaches to districts, even those that included geothermal. And so you kind of get a bunch of different network effects, hence the name. And that modular growth piece is really the critical piece, because the minute you shift to a utility model, regardless of ownership, we're not talking about ownership, we're just talking about when you interconnect multiple different diverse customers, you are a utility by definition, regardless of who is the owner. And that piece of a utility growth model allows for the long-term financing of a utility. And part of the challenge with the straight up geothermal heat pump for a building has always been that it is, for decades, it's been the lowest cost heating and cooling. It's been the most efficient heating and cooling. And the reason it hasn't taken off and we don't all have one is partly because it requires the building owner to have the financial capacity to pay upfront or to finance upfront the cost of the system. And that you're kind of, one person put it as, hey, you kind of have to pay, it's like you bought a car, you have to buy all the gas right when you start. And that's a really interesting way to talk about the financing model. Is most of the cost is up front. The ongoing costs are incredibly minimal. And so the financing model is the challenge, and the utility financing model is all about upfront, high infrastructure cost, long-term payback for societal good. So once you unleash that scaling and the modular effect, each loop being like a Lego block that can interconnect and grow neighborhood to neighborhood, you can create a thermal market. As you scale that thermal market, you have a whole bunch of other thermal opportunities, larger scale and more interesting opportunities for storage, for peaking, etc. So backing up for a moment, because I have a little picture here of that first loop going in the ground and a ribbon cutting at Framingham, Mass, with Eversource Gas going ahead and putting in the first gas utility, Geothermal Energy Network. This fire station pictured on the left is connected to it. There's a bunch of pipes on the right. They actually had to stencil geothermal because we couldn't order them saying geothermal. And these are some of the door hangers. So it currently is serving 140 customers. It's meeting all heating and cooling needs. And just before this talk, we were running our research team report looking at the data from the ground and from the loop and how it's essentially performing wonderfully. And it is doing that, heating, cooling safely with no combustion, and it has not increased the electric grid load for the neighborhood at all. So initial indications, and this is one of the buildings hooked up, is that this has actually demonstrated the potential for each and every one of our core stakeholder needs. And to me, that is really the reason why we've had such an extraordinary momentum and kind of communication around this technology and scaling, to the point where today there are 26 utility thermal energy networks in process. There are 30 gas utilities meeting monthly that represent 50% of the gas customers in the US. There's 12 states that have passed laws around or supporting thermal energy networks. That's an extraordinary scaling. And speaking of slightly less scaling, but really critical, the Framingham First Loop project that I just shared, it's actually, we were able to get a DOE grant to design a second loop pictured here. And we were able to take all of the technical learnings from that, apply them in the process of designing the second loop, and both from scale effects, from learning curve effects, basically drop the cost in half from first loop to second loop, which was exactly what we wanted to see happen and very exciting. And that has been awarded funding to move forward to construction, and hopefully that will begin this fall. Speaking of construction, one of the key pieces of this equation is the workforce. And it's a really interesting, it's a really fascinating topic, because on the one hand, we have on the left some of the gas pipe installers in Massachusetts, workers who were installing gas pipe the week before they got to this site. They had a couple hours of training. They began installing geopipe. They did it pretty much on time and on budget, and then went back to installing gas pipe afterwards. It's pretty much the most smooth and successful workforce transition pathway you can imagine. The gas sales force, they used these lovely marketing materials, went knocking on doors, had one of the best sales days of their lives, and changed their name to the Thermal Solutions sales force, and kept right on going. But drillers, there's no analog in a gas utility. for the drillers, and there's not enough drillers. In fact, Colorado also has a similar challenge. The drilling workforce around the country certainly isn't up to the opportunity of what we need to do going forward. And so we launched a drilling training program and started working with a new group called Geothermal Drilling Association to try to build a good pipeline of new drillers to build the future. So I'm going to comment one moment on a kind of rather geeky topic that I think matters a lot more than it looks like, and that is the electric grid impact. You'll probably hear people talking about data centers and electric demand and all of these things, and we're all worried about our electric demand, but we're also worried about electric cost, and really understanding that our annual demand curve from the electric grid is what drives both the cost and the need for expansion, and the peak is driving that, and the distance between the peak and the trough drives cost. This is a chart just showing, it's called a Falcon curve, it's just showing that the efficiency or the type of technology chosen for electrification really dramatically changes the peak, the cost, the outcomes for the electric grid. And there's been this incredible piece of research from one of the national labs showing that just shifting from air source to ground source, so that's the blue line to the green line, in the US, at about 60% of our buildings, would save 1.5 trillion by 2050 on the electric grid only. So the idea, if you leave one thing from this, aside from it's a pretty falcon, is the idea that the electric grid costs and need are interconnected with your decision about how to heat and cool your home, and so, or your buildings. And so network geothermal is one of the most efficient, effective, and load flattening ways to do it. Therefore, that benefits the electric grid going forward. And that is just some more details on the extraordinary impact of going geothermal heat pumps on our electric costs of all kinds. And so why, if there's all this incredible cost on the electric grid, why are we talking about a gas utility? Remember those workforce, the workers who are putting pipes in the ground, and workers doing load management. Those are all really good analogous workforce transition opportunities. And there's also a lot of pressure in many states to really imagine an energy system without gas, which begs the question, how does one go from having a gas system to not having a gas system or a minimized gas system? And to do that in a way that doesn't hurt the existing customers really requires a kind of stabilized transition. So one of the things that we've proposed is this gas to geo, that where you have a gas system, if you incrementally, street by street, begin to move customers from gas to geo, you can really achieve such an energy transition without destabilizing the company, the customers, or the workforce. And I think that has been a very attractive message, as you can see, for a lot of gas utilities around the country. But it's not all about the utilities, it's actually very much about the people. And we've also got an effort to learn how to help a community initiate and lead projects. And we were able to fund 12 communities locally here in Massachusetts to do what we called Kickstart, and do both technical and community feasibility assessments, educating people as they went, and creating a toolkit and technical support along the way. And we're still learning and engaging with that process. I think it's one of the pieces that we need to address, because this infrastructure requires the interconnection of buildings, and interconnecting buildings means interconnecting people. And so in a funny sense, in a world that feels increasingly disconnected, this is actually a technology that does bring us together. And one of the most enjoyable parts of that Framingham project for a lot of the people involved has been the extraordinary sense of kind of camaraderie and community as everyone learns together and does together and kind of leads the way into the future. Speaking of leading the way into the future, there is a lot of innovation in the details of all of this, and a bunch of great people brought together into a research team, pictured there, and there's a new Geothermal Networks database, a modeling tool, and there's all kinds of fun things to think about. Like, for example, here we are next to the ocean in Massachusetts, and our ocean's warming really fast, which is making the lobsters move north to Maine. Now, we care about a lot of things in Massachusetts, but caring about the lobsters moving to Maine is really important. So we tried calculating how much extra thermal energy is that overheating harbor that we have. And the research team recently used NOAA data to get some numbers. And we found out that since 1950, our harbor and bay have gone about 3.4 degrees Celsius higher. It turns over every 7 days, and that the actual energy of that, if we restored our entire harbor and bay to pre-climate temperature or to 1950s temperatures, we'd actually have enough heating for over 1 million houses every year. And that's our current favorite new statistic we've just discovered. But we did not invent this. In fact, you all did in Colorado. And there's a lovely university out in Grand Junction called Colorado Mesa that we have been calling the Living Lab. We've learned so much from it, so I just want to comment on it. I'm sure you've heard about it. And it's where we first understood the electric grid impacts, as we got this little chart from Excel Energy showing that even in a period of dramatic square footage growth from 800,000 to 1.2 million, Colorado Mesa's electric demand stayed essentially flat on an annual basis, which is extraordinary. It proves all those other fancy charts that I had earlier. That was one of the key learnings from Colorado Mesa. And then, you know, the numbers are amazing. The coefficient of performance or efficiency of 570%. That just matters so much for everything and everyone in terms of cost and in terms of impact and opportunity. So we've been on a long policy journey in Massachusetts. This is just a quick image to give you a sense of it. But over the past several years, we've been kind of building these networks. They've been noted on my slides as I go, of people of different topics. So for example, there is a regulator forum. Colorado's a participant, looking at how does one regulate this in a rational way. There's an advocacy network. What are the correct things to say to communicate and educate and help legislators understand the opportunity? You in Colorado are way ahead and doing a fantastic job. And I think we're all building the policy pathway as we go. That doesn't mean there aren't a bunch of questions. There's questions about how one meters or bills. There's questions about ownership. There's questions about optimization. And there's a lot of questions about cost, because different types of designs and approaches create different cost outcomes. And that's one of the things we're really exploring. And so there's this crazy project pipeline. We've got tons of projects in Massachusetts. There's projects all over the country. I mentioned 26 utility projects, but there's also projects all over the world now. The World Bank is funding 10,000 building scale projects in a bunch of Central Asian and Middle Eastern countries. And every one of these projects, in my dream world, every one of these projects is going to submit the same data set to the data bank. And we're all going to learn together. And to me, that's going to help everyone and lift all boats and help us get to the best energy system we can, is that process of learning. And along the way, I've put Mr. Don Buell, one of the lovely residents in Framingham, in the housing that received geothermal. He invited a French journalist into his apartment to take his photo, and she wanted him to take the picture with his geothermal heat pump console. He did not want that. Don wanted to have his picture with his window. Why? Because what he cared about with his new geothermal was that the window AC unit was gone and the sun came in the morning onto his piano, which he loved to play. And so I just like to put that in because I think it's really easy to get deep in the weeds of all of the technical and the policy and the design. And when it comes to the reality of what matters to people, it's good to pause and think and ask and realize that sometimes it's even just the sunlight that matters the most. So I hope that was enough of an overview. I really think this image is perfect for thinking thermal as a solution and coming together, thinking thermal together. And I invite you two things on the right. One, we are building a map of anyone and everyone anywhere who would like there to be a geothermal service option on their street. So you can add yourself if you'd like. It's a policy tool. We do not give out any data. It's actually some utilities have begun asking for it, but that's not the purpose. On the right, on the bottom, we make all of our work open source and Creative Commons, and so everything on our website and our library, including we're about to launch our modeling tool for this technology, and that will be open source as well. Thank you so much.
Well, great. Zeyneb, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation.
Yeah, what's the working fluid in that single pipe?
Great. So in Colorado Mesa, it is water, just water. That is my strongest recommendation. There are very cold regions that have had just water. We all have water systems. The Eversource gas project in Framingham took a little more cautious route of using some glycol, food grade glycol, added to the water. This is also fine, and it does add cost and some maintenance complexity.
What about removing heat from the ocean? Won't that affect the thermohaline convection current?
So we are just beginning our analysis of the C-Source design and impacts project. We have not done this yet, but the intention is to, first of all, it would be very gradual. We wouldn't have 1 million households worth of customers, even if we somehow got funding to build the thing today. And so the gradual ability to drop the ocean to its pre-climate temperatures is seen as by our Department of Environmental Protection as a restoration that would improve the bay for the ecosystem there. But it would be incredibly gradual, and we are studying that question.
I mean, heat travels a lot faster in water than Earth,
Yes.
right?
Yes, exactly. And that's actually why it's such a huge opportunity, because most of the excess heat from climate change has gone into our ocean. It's quite extraordinary. Yeah, like I said, the ocean is absorbing 5 zetajoules every year of extra heat from climate change, and all of humanity, all of the energy we use is half a zetajoule. So the ocean is really, it's the part where it is heating up is a huge ecosystem problem.
Then isn't that a much better resource to go for first before drilling?
It absolutely is if you have it, and we are attempting to make that happen. Yeah.
Great, Myron.
Oh yeah, I have a couple of questions and comments. First of all, I do not understand why you call it geothermal instead of ground coupling. I use the term geothermal to be associated with energy provided by geysers. I've had a ground source heat pump in my home since 85, and I'm in New Orleans, and we have a tremendously terrific water table that allows heat to move from one home to the other, hundreds of feet below the ground. So I have the first question is why geothermal versus ground
I,
source?
I appreciate that question, and I'm going to tell you a couple of stories in response. When I first started getting into this, I had the same question, like, oh, let's just get away from this word and make it clearer, because there's too many things meaning the same word. And then I began attempting to figure out which word to use. In fact, at one point, a couple of years ago, I worked with Eberle, based in Colorado, to do a survey within the ground source heat pump industry to clarify the name of each thing. So what is a loop? What is ground source? What is geothermal? And we had a section on naming this and had 6 different options and a write-in line. And the majority of the respondents wrote in a new name. So what we ended up doing and resigning ourselves to is that everywhere we go, people have strong feelings about the name, and they are all different. And so we decided to go with the name used by our federal government and Department of Energy, so that we would at least align with them. And then I always use the slide defining and the language, and in my papers, define language up front because of that very problem. It is a challenge for the technology. At the moment, it is a benefit because the word geothermal is in strong favor globally. I think there's just a lot of excitement. And so there's a certain resignation to saying, okay, we're just going to keep defining ourselves.
Okay, I have a couple of comments. I have what I thought was the most energy efficient thing I could think of. I put a ground coupled hydronic system so that I can deliver heating and cooling to my home in a zoned way. And although the COP of my system is 6, like you said, I discovered way back in 1984 that I was doing a COP system 6 when everyone else was hoping to get a 2. And yet I found that the distribution system was more important in my home than the ground coupling, because I was able to cool one part of the home at a time and focus the cooling on dehumidification versus cooling. So the ratio of drying to cooling was matching my climate, which was very different than what's standard off the shelf. So I would like to suggest that you're at the tip of the iceberg of a much bigger set of solutions.
Yep.
Because when we do ducted equipment, we usually lose half or 2/3 the energy in the duct system. We have cooling that's capable of doing the drying, because those two technologies are pushing against each other in a ducted system. And we can't do zoning. So when you really try to do it all, you actually find out that where you dump the heat is less important than how you distribute it around the house.
It's a wonderful, wonderful comment, and I will dig into that. Thank you. And I want to comment that at that Colorado Mesa case study that I mentioned, they have a kind of cascading controls that reminds me of what you're describing, where the control kind of mantra is least energy, closest least energy cost first. And so a building within a building having zones and having those zones actually feed each other first. So if if there's a heating and a cooling demand within the same building, having those cancel, and then only going to the loop, quote unquote, for demand when there's a demand outside of that can't be met. Then from the loop to the next closest, cheapest thermal resource, that cascading demand controls has given a lot of efficiency, and it sounds similar in some ways to what you're saying, the kind of optimization of when and where and which technology. So thank you for your comment.
Right. Stephen, I think you're next. Good questions. I wish we had an ASHRAE person with this, but Stephen.
That was good. Thanks, y'all. Zeynep, my question was, it seems like you're capturing the thermal differential there between the surface and the close ground. Could you also capture differentials from, say, sewer systems or other means where there's a temperature gradient?
Oh gosh, yes. And I think I hope I made clear that part of the amazing part of a thermal energy network infrastructure is it opens up a thermal market, and everywhere we have this ambient thermal opportunity, we can tap it. So yes, sewer, there's even more things that barely look like a differential at all can still be thermal opportunities. I love the project in Denver at the Western Center that is using a shark system to pull all of the heating and cooling for an ambient temperature loop out of the sewer. And we're looking at doing similar projects here. We have a grant program now open, but in the perfect future world, we're really mapping all of the thermal resources in an area and designing the kind of growth of a network to seed around the biggest thermal opportunities and grow from there.
Quick follow-up. What would you say is your minimum temperature differential that you would look to target?
It's actually a really hard question to
Sorry.
because I think the most correct answer I can give you is it depends.
Yeah.
So it
That makes
depends
sense.
on the cost of the technology to tap it, right? If it's almost zero cost, it doesn't really matter, right? So for example, if a choice of design can be to lay the horizontal pipe right next to the sewer, and there's not much sewer flow, but you're going to get some stabilization or thermal energy transfer, well, the cost is minimal, so take it, right? It doesn't need a big delta T. But if you have to install a whole bypass system, and then that's not enough delta T and flow, right? So.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Zeynep, I have a question for you because you're probably a little bit more knowledgeable. We were all very excited here to read the news about the Lennar XL and Dandelion Energy. From the new housing development angle, kind of what are you seeing happening there? Are you seeing gas utilities saying like, hey, greenfield is always an easier approach than brownfield, shall we say, and retrofits, which obviously, as we just discussed, are challenging. But what are you seeing there?
Yeah, a lot of movement to be really brief. So yeah, that's a great project example. There are a lot of them around the country. So if you want to prove the thermal network and or the geothermal, and you don't feel like the blood, sweat, and tears of old building retrofitting, this is the way to go, new build. So Eversource Gas, which has now created its own geothermal rate and is moving forward as a business model, is taking on for its next novel projects new developments, because they feel pretty much that they can, using the gas utility system of accounts, cost effectively deliver use heating and cooling to a whole neighborhood for lower than the cost of gas per customer, and be able to pay off all of the infrastructure they put in within the same kind of cost framework, which is actually phenomenal right out of the boat. But what they don't know how to do is cover the costs of the building retrofits, so they're avoiding it by doing new build. We're doing the building retrofits for the next project. Wherever there's a project where there's external funding that covers it, those projects are moving forward. So you must know the Whisper Valley project in Texas, and they've got a new project going in Florida. They're also taking the same tactic. There's a fabulous project in Toronto new build as well, a single ambient temperature loop system, Bursey Glen. So I think the fastest growth in this single pipe ambient temperature loop thermal network approach is in new build because it removes one of the key barriers.
Great. Myron, you're up next.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that I've been a utility advocate for 40 years, and we're facing a nexus in New Orleans where we're trying to get the utility to abandon cost-based regulation, namely remuneration is based on something like 10% per year of the unamortized original investment as the income. And we realize that this incentivizes building things that we don't need. So that's why we have a gas peaking plant where we could have done it better with rates. So instead, we're trying to push performance-based regulation like they use in England, where you get more money as income based upon the performance you generate. I'm wondering how that it might be used in your utility financing approach.
Well, that's great. And I apologize if I lose anyone with this, but so in Massachusetts, we had our first performance-based rate making back in 2020. And are exploring that approach. I utterly agree with you. And I'm just going to back up and explain for people that the way that we compensate these investor-owned utilities for providing us this necessary good is by creating a fixed kind of return on investment for them. And that is today in most places based on the amount of infrastructure they have invested in. Now, this was actually, in my opinion, a brilliant design when we were building out our energy infrastructure, which was about 150 years ago. And it allowed for a system that really incentivized capital and equity to move into the infrastructure that society needed to build an economy. That's what's actually happening in some other countries. But once you've built out the system, that compensation mechanism, which is what Myron is implying, it actually leads to some things like gold plating or building stuff we don't need so that they can get compensated more. And so the funny thing is, if we want to turn around and build out thermal networks, and incrementally, for example, in Massachusetts, there's a proposal to incrementally replace, segment by segment, the gas system with thermal networks. Well, that's a massive infrastructure build out. So suddenly the mechanism that we started with is actually a pretty good one. It finally is useful again, but perhaps what I keep thinking about is this time, let's build into the regulation and the design of it a system by which once we've built it, the compensation mechanism changes automatically. And we don't end up in the same trap 30 years from now. I don't know if that answers your question sufficiently, but I think it's a great question.
Great. Robert, did you still have a question?
Oh, time is running a little short here, but about a couple decades ago, I did about 3 years worth of ground source heat pumps for Argonne National Labs research demonstration. And because of that, Eastern Nebraska seems to be a really hotbed for ground source heat pumps. I can think of at least 50 different buildings. State Capitol has 600 wells. The university has how many? Most of the major high schools, and then East Nebraska have several hundred wells. There's at least a dozen large installations, but they're all individual systems. Do you have any advice or suggestions on how to network these systems, particularly in the residential area? How do you run a network up and down existing underneath? Can you run them underneath those line up underneath the driveway or up and down the backyards? I was just curious what you observed or any advice.
Yeah, I hate to do the it depends thing again, but without knowing the distance between the buildings and what access rights you have, it's actually like from a engineering standpoint, it's pretty straightforward to network these things. It is literally pipes, pumps, a few feet underground with water in them. We're not, it's not rocket science. And it's pretty doable as long as you have a sufficient density of energy use to justify the interconnecting pipe. It strikes me when, you were saying the capital, and like, I'm not surprised about Nebraska. There's a bunch of, like Arkansas has a lot too. But Nebraska, if the Capitol building has a ground source heat pump, to me, that strikes me as a fabulous opportunity to build out a network from that to include a lot of like the community around it.
I think Capitol has over 600 wells. Like say all these, there's a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen examples, but yeah, it's trying to figure out how you might network an existing residential system, for example.
Yeah, basically you have to stub out pipe from one section, probably a lateral, and design a circulating loop. You really would need enough customers with enough load to make it cost effective.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're at the top of the hour here and got all the big questions answered. Zeyneb, I want to thank you again for joining us. I think we had a successful, my first daytime webinar, and didn't want to make you do this at 9 at night. But super appreciate the work that you're doing. It's really, really incredible. It takes folks like you and like Eversource and others that are, kind of making this push forward to teach everyone else that it's possible. And it's super reassuring to see how many gas utilities are looking at this. And as somebody that actually interviewed many years ago with Spire, it was Laclede Gas at the time. My job as an MBA was going to be looking at ways at how they could innovate, and I wish this had been on the radar then. But
Spire is in the network.
Yeah, I think that's great to see. Reassuring. They were one of the first gas companies and one of the first companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange, apparently.
Wow.
Their ticker was G. Anyway, so I want to thank everyone for joining. I'll make sure, Zeyneb, I'm going to bug you for a copy of the deck.
Yep.
And everyone, I'll get that out to you with the recording once Zoom renders it, which will be probably by tomorrow. But
One
everyone,
quick thing, how long until I'm going to be able to get a district in a pre-existing neighborhood? What's your estimation? 50 years, 70 years, to 20?
I actually have a lot of belief in non-linear scaling. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be a couple at a time. We've got 20, then 50, then 100. But I think a lot more of us on this call, maybe half of us, will actually be living near or able to connect. In 30 years, it'll be normal.
yeah, and Lynn, just a little shout out to the CREST policy team. Robert's on it. I think Chuck and a few others were on the call earlier. The intervention we did on the Colorado Clean Heat Plan, along with Physicians for Social Responsibility and many others, really helped drive the Lennar XL project and hopefully XL
What's
gas.
Lennar XL?
It's a new housing development that'll have
Okay.
geothermal instead of gas. So, Excel, and basically they need to decarbonize the gas system by 2050. So something's going to happen between now and then. So that's kind of a fast track in terms of time frames for major infrastructure. So hopefully the ball is rolling, and Zeyneb, I echo you on nonlinear growth. So
Excellent. Thanks for all your great questions, everyone.
Yep. Thank you. Have a great day.